Okay, now today we're talking about a 1918 and directed by Lawrence Kasdan. It was written with his brother Mark Kasdan. Now Lawrence Kasdan is best known as the screenwriter of The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, as well as The Force Awakens and Solo, a Star Wars story. Now, he wrote Silverado with his brother Mark Kasdan, and of course he directed the Western Silverado, which came out in 1985, and I made some notes here. So on the year that Silverado came out, the most popular films of that year were Back to the Future, Beverly Hills Cop, Rambo, Last Blood, A View to a Kill, and Pee-wee's Herman's Great Adventure. Now, Silverado came in as the 28th most successful film of that year, so it had a lot of competition. Now, the thing about Silverado is Lawrence Kasdan's competition. Now, the thing about Silverado is Lawrence Kasdan has admitted to being a huge fan of Western movies, and why wouldn't he be? And he kind of takes in all the Western tropes that have built up over Hollywood, right from the birth of Hollywood right up to the 80s. And so Silverado features things like a stampede, and the stampede scene in Silverado is absolutely superb. We've got the Western town. Now Silverado, of course, the movie built its own Western town, a 40 building Western town, which has been used subsequently in movies such as Young Gun, Wyatt Earp, Lonesome Dove, among many others.
Hello, folks. I'm John Wayne. You know, with America's bicentennial coming up, we'll be hearing a lot about our early history and making some discoveries. For instance, did you know that when we made the Louisiana Purchase, the money came from loans by the American people? The same thing was true when we bought Alaska, when we built our first transcontinental railroad. Fact is, citizens have been investing their dollars to help America grow ever since 1776. And they're still doing it today with their purchases of United States savings bonds. Buying bonds builds security for yourself as well as your country, and that's not a bad combination. So how about making yourself a part of that 200-year tradition? Take stock in America with United States savings bonds. Thank you.
Now, so as I've said, Silverado is very much a love letter to the genre, and this really comes across to the viewer when you're sitting there watching the movie. You realize that the men behind this movie, that is Lawrence and Mark Kasdan, really do love the genre. Now it's got an all-star cast. You've got Kevin Costner in a very early role. In fact, you could argue that this role was his breakthrough role. You've got Kevin Kline, who is the main actor in the whole thing. You've also got Scott Glenn. Scott Glenn probably shares equal billing with Kevin Kline if you look at the movie as a whole. And of course you've got Danny Glover of the Lethal Weapon franchise. Catchphrase, I'm getting too old for this shit. It is a sweeping Western type score that wouldn't be out of place in such classic Westerns as, say, The Magnificent Seven. And this was composed by Bruce Broughton, and it's a fantastic score that is used effectively throughout the movie. Scott Glenn's character comes across Kevin Kline's character lying there, seemingly unconscious in the dirt, dressed only in his underwear, his long johns, which reminded me a lot of a scene in The Professionals where Lee Marvin first meets up with Burt Lancaster's character in that movie, and Burt Lancaster, of course, is dressed solely in his long johns. There's a line in in The Professionals, where he mentions that where Lee Marvin mentions to Burt Lancaster that he really got to stop missing his pants. And this scene here with Kevin Kline just in his long john seemed to me to be something of a nod of the act, a tipping of the old Stetson, if you like, towards The Professionals, which in itself is a great Western movie. Which in itself is a great Western movie. Introduced to the characters, we soon find ourselves in the town of Turley, and this is a really strange section of the film. It's almost like a short story vignette, if you like, which is unrelated to the rest of the movie. It's kind of like a separate story which is shoehorned into the rest of the movie, but it works rather well. And in this section we've got a sheriff played incredibly by Monty Python's and John Cleese's first line when he comes on screen, he comes across Kevin Kline, is a direct cheeky little wink of the eye to his Monty Python days when he says, "What have we here then?" What have we here then, of course, was a line that the policemen in numerous Monty Python sketches always uttered when they first came on the scene of whatever the situation was that they found themselves faced with. They started to go, "Now then, what have we here then?" So John Cleese is only in the movie for this little short section of the movie, this opening, this setting up of the characters, and this is a time where Scott Glenn and Kevin Kline meet up with Kevin Costner's character. Kevin Costner's character in this movie is a brother of Scott Glenn's character. He's currently locked up in jail because of a ruckus that started. As Kevin Costner's character says, "I only kissed a girl."
The other guy drew first. Right.
Costner's character in this movie is rather he provides a lot of the fun. He's kind of a semi crazy character, nutty character. Costner's performance in this is superb. Costner, of course, would go on to work with Lawrence Kasdan again in Wyatt Earp. And as I mentioned, the western town they built for Silverado was later used for Wyatt Earp. And of course, perhaps Costner's greatest contribution to the western genre is the movie Dances with Wolves, which completely swept the boards in the year it came out, taking Oscars left, right and centre. And even since then, Costner's always been connected to the western. For instance, there's Open Range, which he directed and starred in alongside Robert Duvall. And of course there is Yellowstone, the neo-western series from Taylor Sheridan, in which Costner carried for his first 5.5 seasons before being written out by Taylor Sheridan when Costner found that he had shooting conflicts with his own vanity project, the Western trilogy Horizon. So Costner left Yellowstone to do Horizon, and at the moment of this video only the first part of Horizon has come out. Bombed at the box office, but it's a fairly good Western. But anyway, Costner
Hold him.
provides much of the art and humour to Silverado. Danny Glover's character as well is also very effective. Another one of the more endearing characters of the four main men. Notes here. I've seen Silverado several times. It's a long movie for a western. Scene where Kline and Scott Glenn's character come into contact with Danny Glover's character is very much cliche of the old western tropes. I'm drinking a Scotch here, famous grouse, over the ice, nice whiskey. So Danny Glover goes into a saloon, he's been on a long ride, he orders himself a whiskey, mentions that it's been a long time since he's tasted whiskey, but because he is a black character, and this is a period of the West, the saloon keeper, they don't want him in the saloon, they don't want a black guy in this saloon, so it plays with the racism that many other films have done previously.
I haven't had a drink of whiskey or slept in a bed in 10 days. Give me a bottle.
And as I say, Silverado does bring in a lot of Western stereotypes, a lot of cliches that have been in Westerns before, and they do it really well. So Danny Glover's character is refused to drink, and that leads to an almighty ruckus in which Kevin Costner's character finds himself in jail, as does Kevin Kline, who ends up locked in the same cell as Kevin Costner, and that's where these two men get a chance to bond. Costner tells Kline that his brother, that is Scott Glenn, is going to bust him out of jail.
Thanks for giving me a hand.
Another Western stereotype, or rather cliche, that has been seen in many Westerns right back from John Ford's famous Stagecoach back in the day, 1930 something or other. There's a wagon train, they've been robbed, and Danny Glover and Scott Glenn and Kevin Kline decide to ride out to find the robbers who have taken a chest of money from the wagon train, while Kevin Costner remains behind with the wagon train. And that's a really effective Western cliches, these Western stereotypes, and it uses them to great effect. This really is a love letter from Lawrence and Mark Kasdan to the genre, and you feel that fondness for the genre as a viewer when you're watching the things and unfold. The shooting, the cinematography of Silverado is absolutely superb. It takes in all the expanding vistas, you know, the Western type vistas, the big country, if you like. It takes it all in and presents it there well on screen. There's a wonderful sequence where they have to cross the flooded river with the wagon trains. Again, this is a Western cliche that has been shown in so many movies before, but in Silverado it's presented with such style and such grace and such a love for the subject that it really, really works. It looks absolutely tremendous. The way it was shot with the cameras on tracks, allowing them to follow the scene, allowing them to shoot the entire scene, sometimes aimed at the horse's legs, sometimes at the midsection, sometimes at the actors on the top. It just looks incredibly.
Well, this is it, gents. Mama told me to head through that notch.
Good luck, Mel.
Yeah, maybe we'll see you around sometime. Yeah, maybe.
How the climax of the movie is one of the finest elongated shootouts I've ever seen in any Western movie. And Silverado, for a movie made in 1985, for a genre movie made in 1985 when the Western was long out of favour, it's quite incredible. I mean, in that year as well, later in that year came out Clint Eastwood's Western Pale Rider. And as big a fan as I am of Eastwood, I think that probably in terms of Western stakes, Eastwood is second only to the great John Wayne. But Silverado is a far better film than Pale Rider. And on this channel soon I'm going to be reviewing every single Eastwood Western, right up from, we're going to start off with a little introduction to my Eastwood season with a kick-off of his role of Rowdy Yates in Rawhide, and then
keep moving, 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 though they're disapproving, keep them doggies moving, Rawhide.
We're going to go right through for a Fistful of Dollars, right all the way through to The Unforgiven, and taking in every single Western that Eastwood made in the period between these two movies, between A Fistful of Dollars, between The Unforgiven. So we've got some of the offbeat stuff like Bronco Billy, The Beguiled I think is a fantastic movie, and we've taken them all, you know, The Outlaw Josie Wells, which is a recognised classic, and of course The Unforgiven is probably one of the finest Westerns ever made, and I would say that in terms of great Westerns it's probably only second to one other Western, and that is John Ford's The Searchers. Silverado, it's a fantastic movie. You can feel the director's fondness for the Western genre when you're watching the movie. It is absolutely fantastic. To give it a rating, and I use an 100-point rating to allow me to have a little bit more scope with my rating system. I don't want to go 1 to 5 and say this is a 5-star movie, although if I did do a rating of 1 to 5, I think this would probably gain about 4.5 stars. But I'm going to give this out of 198%. I think Silverado is a fantastic movie. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to come back and see more Western reviews, then please subscribe. I'm also going to be talking about whiskey in a few future videos. And of course my book, A Dark History of Whiskey, is less than 3 months away now. So cheers for now. That's Silverado. Available on DVD. It's also streaming, it's also streaming on several networks out there, several of the on-demand services. Silverado, an absolutely fantastic late period Western from 1985, directed by Lawrence Kasdan, and starring, of course, Kevin Costner, Kevin Kline, Scott Glenn, Rosanna Arquette. And it's interesting with the Rosanna Arquette parts that early on in the movie, the romance with Kevin Kline is very much hinted at, and there was going to be a lot more of that in the finished movie, but it was cut out. So the Rosanna Arquette and Kevin Kline romance didn't play out in the final movie, although Rosanna Arquette does get top billing. We've got Brian Dennehy who plays a fantastically corrupt sheriff, and he plays that part really well. We've got Danny Glover, of course, Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum's part in this film is quite amazing. Jeff Goldblum, of course, previously to this movie, was probably best known for being the lead mugger in the Charles Brosnan movie Death Wish. But Jeff Goldblum was absolutely stunning in this film, and Linda Hunt. So that's Silverado, an highly recommended Western. This is what we would term a neo-Western. It's a modern Western film. It was made in 1985, although now the time has gone on. 1985 is an historical period, but it's a fantastic film that came out of the year of Rambo, Back to the Future. What other films did I list? The James Bond movie, A View to a Kill, Beverly Hills Cop, and it still holds its own as one of the finest movies of 1985.